While tough new measures to crack down on alcohol abuse in the Northern Territory appear to be having a major impact. Analysis of Northern Territory police and health statistics show there's been a significant fall in alcohol-related assaults and hospital admissions in the past month. Matt Cunningham's been crunching these numbers. He joins me now live from Darwin. Matt, looks like good news.
Certainly does, Chris. What I've done is gone back and looked both at the past 12 months and over a 3.5-year period, of which I've been able to obtain some of this police and health department data. Now, if you look at the past 12 months, we've seen quite a significant drop in the Northern Territory in alcohol-related assaults. In fact, there's been a 24% drop across the Northern Territory in the past 12 months and a 41% drop in Alice Springs. Now, this coincides with a couple of significant policies that the Northern Territory government has introduced. If you go back to September last year, it returned a permanent police presence to bottle shops in Alice Springs and later also in Katherine and Tennant Creek. And also 12 months ago, it introduced a minimum floor price on alcohol across the Northern Territory. Now, this policy of the police on bottle shops in particular appears to be incredibly effective. I've crunched the numbers, the hospital alcohol-related hospital admissions in both Alice Springs and Katherine, both when that permanent police presence is in place and when it's not. And in Alice Springs in particular, there is a 40% decrease in those hospital-related alcohol admissions when that permanent police presence is on the bottle shop. In Katherine, that decrease is about 27%. I spoke to Michael Thorne, who's the Chief Executive of the Foundation for Alcohol Research and Education. Now, he says that policy in particular of having those police permanently stationed on bottle shops in Katherine, Alice Springs and Tennant Creek appears to be having a major impact.
Been a really critical intervention. It seems to have had an impact beyond some of those other measures that have been put in place, and that doesn't surprise me because it really has focused on people's access to booze, and we know that in the end it's access to booze that causes the problem.
Chris, this is a policy that has a long history and also one that hasn't been without controversy. Now, Labor back in 2011 first brought in the idea of putting police on bottle shops, although they left it up to the police command to decide when those officers were actually placed on those liquor outlets. Now, the Country Liberal Party government back in 2014 actually mandated those police on the bottle shops, and we did see a decrease after they did that back in 2014. In 2016, when Labor came back to power, they returned that power to police command. They weren't always there. Again, you saw the numbers rise. But in September last year, they actually had these dedicated officers, you can see on your screen now, police auxiliary liquor inspectors, they're calling them, and they are now permanently placed on every bottle shop in Katherine, Tennant Creek and Alice Springs. There has been criticism, however, particularly from human rights organisations. In fact, in June, no less a figure than the Secretary-General of Amnesty International was in Alice Springs. He was asked for ID by some of these police auxiliary liquor inspectors. He then accused the Northern Territory government of introducing a racist policy. He said Aboriginal people were being unfairly targeted by this policy. Well, Michael Thorne has responded to those claims that this policy is racist. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
From the perspective of the people who are harmed by alcohol, and I think that the human rights of those people are the ones that we should be focused on, not the rights of the drinker.
That's probably a fair point, though, Chris, when you consider the incredibly high rates of domestic violence we see suffered, particularly by Aboriginal women in the Northern Territory, and how often alcohol is involved in those cases. So across the board, a pretty good result for the Northern Territory government on the back of some pretty tough alcohol restrictions that were brought in. There is one area perhaps where their policies haven't been that successful. That is the introduction of what's known as the banned drinker register. That sees every person in the Northern Territory have to produce identification and have it scanned before they purchase alcohol. When that policy was in as the only policy, without the permanent police presence on the bottle shops and without the minimum floor price, we did see an increase over that 12-month period in both alcohol-fuelled assaults and alcohol-related hospital admissions. However, that has again fallen in the past 12 months since the introduction of those other measures that I spoke about.
Yeah, Matt, fascinating numbers there. It's not a perfect world. You've got to make some compromises. And as you say, it looks like these laws are actually working, which is a good thing, cutting down on violence and hospital admissions. Just tell us briefly, when you have police stationed at the bottle shops permanently, what do they do? Are they essentially vetting, making sure that people who are already drunk are not getting more alcohol, or is it mainly underage drinkers? What do they actually intercept mainly?
Well, it's all of those things, Chris. It's also ensuring that people, when they purchase alcohol, have a place where they can go and drink it. Now, to give you an example, I was down in Alice Springs just a couple of weeks ago, and I checked this out for myself. Now, I drove into the bottle shop. Straight away, the police auxiliary liquor inspector came up and asked me for my identification. Now, when he saw that I live in Darwin, he then asked me where I planned to consume the alcohol that I had purchased, and then I had to give him an address where I was going to drink that alcohol. So I actually had to show him my hotel room key, and then I was able to take that alcohol away and drink it. Now, one of the reasons for this is that in the past they've had issues in Alice Springs, particularly with people buying alcohol and then taking that alcohol into the town camps in Alice Springs, which are supposed to be dry. So that's one of the main things that the police auxiliary liquor inspectors are checking for. Of course, everyone in the Northern Territory, doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what colour your skin is, what your background is, everyone still has to have their identification checked through the banned drinker register. So the government's certainly arguing that a combination of these policies that it's introduced has helped contribute to what we are now seeing, which does look like some pretty significant drops in both alcohol-related assaults and alcohol-related hospital admissions.